My colleague. So thank you everyone for joining today. Good morning and good afternoon to all of you. To start with, we would like to request all our participants to please follow the housekeeping rules as displayed on the screen. And we are live on our Facebook channel as well. Okay, so thank you very much for joining us today for this conversation on the mutual value measurement framework developed by our member, Business Council of Cooperatives and Mutuals, BCCM, along with researchers from Monash University, Australia. ICA-AP has relaunched COOP Dialogue, which is a 6-month publication to start a dialogue on issues that are relevant to cooperatives. The first issue on cooperative identity in the Asia Pacific was released on 23rd November. And the second issue now focuses on future-proofing cooperatives in Asia and Pacific through innovations. The cooperative and mutual enterprises often find it challenging to communicate the value they create. So this MVM framework, it helps the CME sector in Australia to measure their total value creation through a set of common dimensions and shared language of measuring and reporting mutual value. The framework uses 6 dimensions to cover unique areas of values that CMEs generate, which are commerciality, shaping markets, member relationships, community relationships, ecosystem and reciprocity, and mutual mindset. The MVM framework can be used by CMEs across different industries of different sizes and with different capabilities. It has been field tested through research by Monash University's Business School and is available with an implementation guide and templates that will allow interested CMEs to assess and plan the full adoption of the framework. Today, we will talk to Ms. Melina Morrison, the Chief Executive Officer of BCCM, to know more about this framework. We are also happy to have with us Dr. Paul Thamber, who is a senior lecturer with the Department of Accounting at the Monash Business School. We welcome our guest speakers and look forward to having an engaging conversation. We will start by playing a short video on MVM framework. I would request my colleague to start sharing the screen. After that, I would request Mr. Balu Iyer, Regional Director of ICA-AP, to start the conversation with our guests.
What is mutual value measurement? Mutual value measurement arose from a challenge. How can cooperative and mutual enterprises consistently measure and communicate the value their businesses create? To meet this challenge, the Business Council of Cooperatives and Mutuals has partnered with researchers at Monash University to develop a new approach to measuring our positive impact on our members, customers, our community, and the economy. The Mutual Value Measurement Framework. The Mutual Value Measurement Framework enables cooperatives and mutuals to measure their total value creation through a set of common dimensions and a shared language about measuring and reporting mutual value. The MVM framework can be used by cooperatives and mutuals across different industries of different sizes and with different capabilities. The MVM framework uses 6 dimensions to cover the unique areas of value that cooperatives and mutuals generate. 1. Commerciality. 2. Shaping markets. 3. Member relationships. 4. Community relationships. 5. Ecosystem and reciprocity. 6. Mutual mindset. The MVM framework enables value creation through sustainability and environmental, social, and governance standards. Cooperatives and mutuals practicing MVM can apply to have the framework accredited. Achieve MVM accreditation for your cooperative or mutual. Accreditation signifies to members in the community that a cooperative or mutual has successfully applied the MVM framework in accordance with its intended design. Cooperatives and mutuals applying for accreditation are evaluated by an independent panel of experts. For cooperative and mutual enterprises, accreditation is a mark of quality and an acknowledgement of their profound commitment to the ongoing promotion and creation of mutual value for their members and their community. There has never been a more important and critical time to let our values shine. Find out more at mvm.coop.
Okay. Am I audible? Okay. Melina, thank you very much for agreeing to talk with us about the mutual value measurement. We appreciate your readily agreeing to our requests whenever we ask for information, your involvement, interviews, etc. So thank you very much. As Shivali mentioned, the COOP Dialogue 2 is looking at innovation in cooperatives. We feel innovation is needed to meet evolving needs of members, to address competition in the market, to respond to changes in business goals, and to tackle external shocks. The COVID-19 pandemic is a very good example of that. From your vantage point as the head of the peak body of CMEs, how do you see innovation landscape among CMEs in Australia?
Thank you very much for the invitation to this live stream event. From Australia to all of our Asia Pacific cooperators, we like to say hello to you and share our best wishes. We have been sharing the same challenges as the rest of the globe in different ways to deal with the latest health crisis. But to your question about innovation, Balu, this is not the first shock that the world has encountered in the last few years. In many ways, we're just recovering from a global financial shock. And before that, many shocks that have come to communities and often have been the catalyst for cooperatives to form in the first place. After all, our business model is in fact an innovation, a community-driven innovation, often to a market inequality or a crisis or a problem that communities of people encounter, and they need to find a mutual solution. So in terms of thinking about innovation and the landscape at the moment, we hold two tensions in our organizations. On the one hand, we know that we are in fact a structure that is used for this, people-driven innovation in the face of crisis. On the other hand, we often seem to be challenged by a lack of innovation or a culture or mindset which can't support the very agile and rapid responses we often need as businesses, commercial businesses. So we've been looking at this for the last few years at the BCCM, and its innovation mindset is a big part of our education program this year. In fact, we're going to run the first innovation accelerator course to try and learn from innovation mindset theory and practice and bring that into our organisations. But one thing that we did during COVID last year was to do a piece of research on how innovative our organisations are in the face of crisis. So we produced a report that was called Leading the Resilience, and it looked at how our members had responded to COVID. And found that there were 5 characteristics of innovation that our research showed was consistent across these organisations, our members in different sectors. And this is part of us providing an evidence base that we are highly innovative organisations. We found, for example, that cooperatives are instinctively job keepers, that our members and other cooperatives avoided making job losses and did everything. They went to extraordinary lengths to keep their people employed. We also found that cooperatives, we used the term bailed in their resources. So they used built up reserves and their own balance sheets to underwrite the costs of the crisis. They acted very swiftly and nimbly, we found, to pivot and change their operations, sometimes to a completely digital business model to keep operating. And we found that they didn't rely as much in Australia on government subsidies. Once again, they were using a self-help mindset. So we want to build innovation capacity, but at the same time, we want to bring to light just how innovative the business model is itself, the characteristics of co-ops.
Oh, that's great. I think you find many papers which have been looking at responses of cooperatives post-COVID-19. It's not post, we're still within it, but it's good to hear that you all have looked at it from a more evidence-based approach so that you are able to show in concrete terms. And it's also very, something which we would like to know more is this whole innovation mindset and the accelerator that you all are proposing. Maybe that's something which we can touch base later on. But coming back to the MVM framework, when we look at, you have a website for that, and when the first thing which one notices on the website, it says that it's a significant challenge for cooperatives and mutual enterprises to consistently quantify and communicate the value their businesses create. So why do you think it has been difficult for CMEs to quantify and consistently communicate their value and impact? And was this the motivation to create the MVM framework?
Well, most definitely, because the framework and the partnership with Monash, which we'll talk more about a bit later on, evolved out of a conversation with our members where we heard a consistent message that the existing frameworks, methodologies, particularly around accounting and measuring in more traditional or mainstream ways, our success as businesses, didn't capture the holistic value creation that mutuals and cooperatives create for members and the wider community. And it really seemed to be a problem for cooperatives in any industry. It was a shared challenge. And so therefore, we determined that it was less about a particular industry and more a problem of communicating how our business model has these competitive advantages for communities and members. So the idea was really to create something that came from, that was modeled at the core around the business model. Rather than trying to paste something on from outside, let's actually start with cooperatives themselves and explore 3 areas. What is mutual value? How do we create, as cooperatives and mutuals, this value? How is it created specifically in different areas and with different stakeholders? And then how do we actually reflect that back? And in particular, how do we communicate it in a way that actually is meaningful to our different stakeholders, particularly members, so they can really understand where the value for them is in being a member of a cooperative? Sometimes it's more it's more difficult to communicate directly back to a member. It's often we hear a challenge of larger cooperatives. So as you grow and the relationship between the member and the original catalyst for the organisation, the cooperative forming, gets more diluted over time, the cooperative is still creating this value, but the additional and newer members don't necessarily see it in the same way as the founding members. So how do we continue to communicate it? Because we want to grow our cooperatives. We want them to have more market share, and we want them to be able to communicate that they are a competitive alternative to other businesses that offer the same services but have a different business model.
So it's also, yes, I get that the members need to be communicated, but you had mentioned about stakeholders. So even the external audience, the communication is an issue there too?
Yes, absolutely. And when we look a bit more at the dimensions, and perhaps Dr. Thamba can go through those in a little while, you'll see that 6 dimensions place across the framework, places much focus on dimensions that have to do with stakeholders other than the member. That's not to say that the primary purpose of a cooperative is not to create return and protect member value, create benefit for members. But those other areas of value creation, such as our community relationships, such as ecosystems and reciprocity, how we actually exist within an industry, for example, and the value that we create just by being part of the industry we're in, like agriculture or financial services. How do we actually create value for the market, the economic market that we're in? So we have a dimension that's called shaping markets. Sometimes these stakeholders are not just people and communities, but they can be the economy or society at large. We wanted to be able to show that the value, it's like the ripple effect. The value really extends to the entire system in which we operate.
State Cover, one of the CMEs which has implemented the framework, has noted that the MVM framework fits well with their organization, unlike other reporting frameworks available for businesses in Australia. So what makes the MVM framework innovative and different from other reporting frameworks or tools?
Well, I suppose the first thing was that it's been developed with and by cooperatives and mutuals. It wasn't done by Monash to them or for them, or by any other group that might be measurement experts, for example. It's been developed out of conversations and interviews and the researchers spending time in different cooperative organisations and listening to them and speaking to different people engaged in the organisation at all different levels of management and the members, etc., to find out where the value is for each of those different stakeholders. So that's the most important thing, and I guess that's the way we describe it is it's less like trying to put, the square peg into the round hole of another framework. We've created the perfect model of ourselves as perfect as possible in a measurement methodology. And I think it's really unique in this aspect that so much time, almost 2 years, was spent just in conversation with cooperatives to understand how they create value and how they would express it. It's the first time, for example, we've ever seen a dimension that is around the impact that we have in a market. It's the first time we've seen something we call it mutual mindset, but if you like, that's the kind of culture or the DNA or the ethos of being a cooperative. It's not just numbers either. It's also about behavior. It's trying to capture behaviors and the way that we organic relationships that we create, the networks that we create, which are quite hard to capture as numbers on on the balance sheet, for example.
Oh, great. I see that also Dr. Paul Thumber from Monash University, your research partners here. So the question is, I guess it's for both of you. You could answer first and then Dr. Paul could respond also. So how did this partnership come about and why was it important to tie up with the university to develop the MVM framework?
Well, I'll let Dr. Thumber give his response in a moment, but I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Monash, because in our circumstance, in this particular circumstance, Monash came towards us as an industry, particularly through the outreach of Dr. Thumber himself, following a discussion that he'd taken part in, where he had listened to a member describing just some of these accounting and measurement and reporting challenges for their organisation, in that case, a cooperative bank. And so Paul actually came towards us and suggested that perhaps there was a way of understanding this problem from a research point of view. And because there was that discussion between the industry and researchers with an academic lens right at the beginning, and not trying to commercialize or sort of turn this into something which could be sold, but just starting with the question, let's just interrogate the question of mutual value. We've actually ended up creating something quite visionary, we hope, that has value for not only our members, but the broader cooperative sector.
Yeah, no, that's a great way of putting it, Melina, and thank you, Bala, for the opportunity. What we do is, in a university sense, is referred to as fundamental research. So we go in and look at real business problems that don't necessarily have a ready-made solution. So we're not like a consultant who, and consultants have a role to play in the business world, but we don't have a suitcase full of tools that we can take and shape and provide to you as a solution. So this was a fundamental problem. As I heard members of different co-ops and mutuals sort of talk about this problem, what occurred to me was that this was a fundamental problem. There was a need for someone to sit down and really think this through and spend the time trying to understand the problem from the perspective of those who were struggling with the issues and to come up with a solution. And that's what we do in business schools and as researchers. Our role is to, because we are publicly funded, our role is to go and help us, identify some of these fundamental problems and then find solutions in a partnership, in a collaborative partnership with the industry that is affected. And co-ops, are collaborators. They were very willing to sit down with us. It took us 11 months through collaboration with BCCM and some of the the co-op and mutual members to actually scope the problem, to identify the deliverables, to identify the inputs in terms of what had to be done, how it was going to be done, how it was going to be funded. While we are not funded for our time, there are costs in terms of us moving around to different organizations. We've been with 13 organizations across Australia, and traveling and spending time, roughly about a week, in some cases longer than that, with an organization. That takes a lot of, there are a lot of direct costs associated with that. So that had to be funded. So together we came up with this project that had a budget of around 1.1 million. So there was a core contribution, Monash putting in the cost of our time and the related overhead with that, and then the sector coming up with half the cost to fund it, the direct cost of the project. And I think where we have landed is something that is still, every day I look at, even today I was looking at the booklet that Melina had sent Shivali that outlines the framework, that promotes the framework. And I was sitting there thinking, my goodness, where have we landed? We never thought we would end the journey where it has ended. And it is still growing. To have this conversation with you guys is just amazing. It's now spread, the news is spreading beyond Australia. So, it's great.
Oh, thank you both for that. Yes, I think it's taken time, it's taken resources, it's taken effort, but it's been done in a joint manner, I think, so that both sides, the cooperative, the university, BCCM, all can be on the same page and come up with a framework. It was mentioned before, and in the video which was shown, and Melina, you also mentioned about the 6 dimensions of the MVM framework, about commerciality, shaping markets, member relations, community relations, ecosystem and reciprocity, and the mutual mindset. These all are close to the 7 cooperative principles. So is there a reason you didn't take the 7 principles as they were and develop the framework? Or what added value does the MVM framework provide to these principles as they are?
That is such a great question. I think the first thing to say is that we envisage the most powerful way of truly getting embedded connection between the cooperative principles and values and the strategy of cooperatives is to embed the principles inside the measurement methodology. They can be mapped across the 6 dimensions in a multitude of ways. They can sit under single dimensions, or they can be, in fact, a primary metric or measurement tool that's used to actually determine whether value is being created well under a particular dimension. I don't think it's an either or. It's really, in many ways, emerging that MVM can be a bridge to enhancing the understanding of just how truly important and strategic identifying with the ICA principles in your business strategy is. What does, if you think about the way that cooperatives now have to engage, they have their principles, and the principles are both values and have value statements attached to them, but they're also part of our legal system. In Australia, the 7 cooperative principles are embedded in Australian law. They sit there in the constitutions of our cooperatives, but our cooperatives are still using traditional accounting methodology and frameworks to express, often to members, but also to regulators and the wider community, how successful they are as businesses. And those accounting frameworks they've been using have not adequately according to what the members have said to us, reflected the value creation. So there's still needed to be a way to translate, if you like, what the principles mean. What, for example, does open and voluntary membership or economic participation mean in respect of a specific cooperative's business business value, both to its members and its wider stakeholders. So I think one of the journeys that we're on is to work out how these two parts of our cooperative identity can fit together, where members are using mutual value measurement. Paul did a lot of the primary research with his colleagues, and well, perhaps you'd like to share how cooperative principles did or didn't come up in those conversations.
Yeah, so I think there's probably two things that we need to keep in mind that is relevant to this question. I think, again, a great question, Banu. One is, as I said, we had a fundamental problem here. So we had to go in and understand the problem without any baggage. Now that includes not taking on anything that the co-op and mutual sector had already picked up, because clearly it was not working for them. So we went in with basically a blank piece of paper with three questions, as Melina said. What is mutual value? How do you create it? And how do you currently measure it? Those are the three questions that we started our conversation. And we spoke to something like 260 people across these 13 organizations, right from the board level down to frontline staff providing services to members and customers. So we went in with a blank piece of paper just to understand, to listen, and to then understand, and then to develop the 6 dimensions eventually. So that was one thing to keep in mind. Now, as we went through that process, yes, we were aware of the cooperative principles. We did have a look at them. We were aware of some of the other frameworks that some of the co-ops and mutuals were dabbling with. So we looked at that. And that certainly sort of was there as part of that broader information set that sort of we kept in mind as we developed our the framework. But our principal focus was on understanding what people were telling us and then developing the framework from that. But now when you sit back, and we haven't done this exercise, but if you look at the framework and the 6 dimensions and compare it to the 7 cooperative principles, you will see that there are links and connections and overlaps. So I don't think we are, in a sense, you wouldn't, look at the 6 dimensions and look at the cooperative principles and say this is apples and oranges. No, that's not where we have landed. We have landed pretty close. We may not be exact. One may not be driving the other, but essentially, I think we have landed in a place where the 6 dimensions make sense. And remember, this is a generic framework. That is the other value add of this framework. If you think about Australia alone, there's something like over 2,000 cooperatives and mutuals. No 2 cooperatives are the same. No 2 mutuals are the same. We had the challenge of developing a framework by talking to these 13 organizations who were not necessarily totally representative of everyone in the sector, but then having got that information and having analyzed it, we had to step up and abstract to a level where we could come up with a generic framework that a mutual bank could take and roll out, a social housing co-op could take and implement, an agricultural co-op could take and implement. So we have, and that is one of the advantages of this framework. It is not a one-size-fits-all framework. It is entirely flexible and adaptable to the local circumstances of a particular co-op or mutual. So
that's interesting that you went with a blank sheet of paper, and the question was to ask the co-ops how were they internalizing the mutual values. And then it's also interesting to see that at the end, it fits with the 7 cooperative principles. There is, so that's the way you approach is interesting. So as value-based businesses, the greatest challenge for CMEs is to let their value shine. So what kind of economic and social value does the MVM framework help measure or capture? Does the framework measure only quantitative aspects or qualitative aspects too? And again, this question is both, Melina, to you and Dr. Tambar.
I'm happy to go first if you want.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Again, another feature of our framework is that we are not, I mean, even though I'm an accountant and, I'm quite comfortable working with numbers and my colleagues on the team were all accounting academics, we are not necessarily focused on only numbers, because measurement, when you think measurement, we automatically think numbers, but measurement is all about measuring what you value, what you create, and then you value that. And these days, we are very familiar with a whole range of ways of measuring. Now, you may be getting members to provide feedback to this particular webinar. They may give you, qualitative feedback. That is measurement. When we go to a restaurant and we like it, people give us the Google page that relates to their restaurant. They ask us to put to rate them and to put a positive comment. That is measurement. So measurement comes in all sizes and shapes. It can be quantitative, it can be qualitative. And this framework, again, a unique feature is that it is not wedded to any particular type of measurement. You can, if you so wish, only have quantitative metrics, but we have not seen anyone wanting to do that, because that is, again, not that was the drawback that organizations had before we had this framework, that the accounting frameworks were limited. So what we are seeing is that organizations are looking at both quantitative and qualitative ways of measuring. The other thing about measurement that is important to remember is that the reason we measure is also to be able to communicate what we have done. So when an organization, when a CFO stands up, a listed corporation, a CEO and a CFO stand up and do an analyst presentation and report on their profit, they're not just reporting on a set of numbers, they are also communicating to their shareholders what they have done as an organization over the past 12 months. So measurement and reporting is also about communicating your purpose, your values, your activities, and how well you have achieved or carried out those activities, and how well you have achieved the goals that you have set for yourself. So for the first time, we now have a framework where any co-op or mutual, if they are implemented in the right way and use it, they have now a common language to use to communicate their values and their performance. I mean, shaping markets as a dimensions. Anyone in a co-op or a mutual would have told you that that is a key area for value creation for a co-op or a mutual. But until we came and put some language around that and definitions around that, there wasn't a language that they could use. So today, people can talk about, how if someone says to a CEO of a co-op or a mutual, how do you create value and what is that value? They can point to the framework and say, here are 6 ways or dimensions in which we create value. And one of the areas we create value is by shaping a market, and they can talk about that. We are a credit union. We have shaped a market in this particular region over the last 50, 70, 100 years, and this is how we have done it. And they can put some measures around that, both quantitative and qualitative. So measurement is more than just turning a set of numbers and saying, I met a KPI. It is a communication platform as well for any type of organization. And that's why the framework, I think, is having a lot of resonance as people get into it and as they think about it and as they allow it to shape their purpose. I mean, a lot of the organizations that have taken it on board have started by reshaping their purpose or renewing their purpose, re-looking at their strategy and their objectives, and making sure that they are capturing that. Because some organizations realize that, yes, we are shaping markets, or we are creating value for the community that we are in, but we have never focused on that because we didn't have the language and the ability to do that. So now, through the framework, they are able to do that. So that's where a lot of organizations seem to be starting their MVM journey, by looking at their purpose and their strategy and making sure that it is aligned with the framework. Then you have a platform from which you can measure the value that you create, both quantitatively and qualitatively, and then be able to communicate.
Okay. Melina, anything to add from your side?
I think that's fairly comprehensive, but I was just thinking as Paul was speaking, again, back to the question about the principles, the global principles. There's so much opportunity, I think, here to help some members that might not deeply understand why the principles are important, not just as a poster on the wall, are nice to have, but why it's important to track through time, longitudinally, if you like, or periodically review how you're going against the things you've agreed you create value for, and how you create that value, because it connects in a way the philosophy of cooperation to the actual practical application of cooperation to the business itself, and the business environment. One example might be cooperation amongst cooperatives. Many cooperatives who've started to use mutual value measurement are thinking for the first time about reciprocity and ecosystem involvement and reciprocity. One of the things that they're putting under that dimension is their membership of the BCCM, or their engagement with other cooperatives and mutuals. And I'm not sure to the people watching now, this might seem very obvious, but it's not necessarily obvious to all cooperatives and mutuals that might have, over time lost that connection. And yet it's so deeply important that they understand that that's actually something that contributes to their business success and their success for members, and it's worth measuring and observing through time.
Okay. So can you share, again, in the video, there was mention about MVM accreditation. Can you let us know what does this involve and how long does it take for somebody to get accredited?
Well, one of the things we've started to discover, so a lot of the evolution of mutual value measurement is occurring as we work with members, directly as they apply and implement the model, which is also, it's a great cooperative, ethos to co-design something. So one thing that is starting to emerge is that we want to be good stewards of and create a peer network where we can safeguard the quality and the standards of the use of mutual value measurement. So this is not about getting an accreditation like you might get a B Corp accreditation where you're certified. They measure you in a survey, you get given a score, and then you're allowed or not allowed to use a particular mark. What we are measuring and assessing is how they have actually understood and applied the framework. So the idea there really is to make sure that we keep working together as cooperatives to understand how the purpose for which the framework was intended to be used. And that's as much to safeguard the exploitation of it, for example, by organisations, that it could be organisations outside of the cooperative movement. So it holds us true to the standards that we've set, which are not to say you have, you've your MVM's better than someone else. It's really to help cooperatives as they go along understand and do the mutual value measurement framework at a high quality level, so that they're getting the most from it as well. Paul, did you want to add anything?
No, I think what the accreditation does is that it creates a mark in a community of organizations that are on a similar journey. It says that you have taken on the framework, you have applied it appropriately, and you are measuring your value in the way it was intended, and you're communicating that. So it's a sort of a tick that says that you are a quality user of the framework. But I think it also signals to the world outside cooperatives and mutuals that there is something here that is new and innovative, and that has been proven, peer-reviewed, and recognized as being, best practice. So I think that there is a value there as well. And over time, as this mark becomes better known and the brand surrounding that, grows, it will be something that the sector can take and showcase and say, alongside some of these other benchmarks that we have, like the B Corp, that here's something that is unique to the corp and mutual sector, but it is comparable to some of those other generic frameworks around. So that's the intention, I think. Now, there might be a further evolution of the frame, this accreditation, to suggest that, at the moment, all we are doing, the accreditation is only signifying that you have implemented the framework in the way it was intended. But maybe down the track, there could be another level of certification that says that you're really creating mutual value and that it is exemplary compared to your peers in that sector. And then hopefully, at some point, you can also say, compared to a non-co-op, this is where you stand. So you're no different or you're better to a non-co-op organization in your industry sector. But, this is a journey and an evolution that has to take place over time.
Right. I think that's something which you answered. It's a journey you may do this, have the MVM framework done, but then say 3 years down, how much are you adhering to it or not is something which during the journey, how are you consistently putting it in place, I think would come to know later. So you'd mentioned that when you all started, it was with 13 organizations and across their levels. So what has been the interest among CMEs to adopt the MVM framework? So what are the numbers currently?
We've created some supports for cooperatives and mutuals, and we invite cooperatives from anywhere in the world to approach us to use mutual value measurement and go on the discovery journey with other cooperatives. So one thing that we've done amongst the BCCM membership is to create a community of practice. There are around 30 of our members that are at some stage of implementing the MVM. 4 have completed the journey in the sense that they have spent time developing their unique mutual value measurement framework, and they have applied for accreditation, which the actual process of that involves submitting your mutual value measurement framework to an experts panel, which comprises researchers, BCCM representatives, and an industry representative as well, so that we can make an assessment if the MVM has been used in accordance with its intended purpose. And they have received the mutual value mark. So we've now got our first cohort of mutual value impact organisations which are they've been given permission to use the mutual value mark, which if you go to the websites of, if you look at mutual value measurement, MVM.COOP, you'll see those 4 organisations, and they're using the mark. They're displaying the mark because they want to start a discussion about how they create value for all of their stakeholders. We've got a great start within our membership, and we're also receiving interest from around the world. So, Paul, you've had some approaches from different countries, and the International Insurance Cooperative Insurance Federation, ICMEF, is also invited a presentation.
Yeah.
So how would, so this interest is there. So that was my follow-up question in case members from other countries would like to know more. So what would be the process? Who should they approach, and how do they go about?
Well, I will share Paul and my direct emails with this group, but Mutual Value Measurement has its own website, and there is a contact email address there. So we really welcome and encourage you to come and ask us how to be involved, because we believe mutual value measurement should be shared and exists for the global cooperative movement. We do, to safeguard the framework, the intellectual property in it is shared with Monash and BCCM. And what we're asking is that if your cooperative wants to explore it and see if it's useful, that you request permission to use mutual value measurement. So we grant that permission. Monash and BCCM grants you that permission, and we ask you to do some various things as in return, in reciprocity. Probably, in most cases, that will be agreeing to be accredited, because that's a way of us making sure that we've been able to help you on the journey to using it, using it to its best possible, highest quality value. One thing we can do, if you join the MVM movement, is invite you to be part of the peer group, the network, the community of practice. And there are resources that those members and those cooperatives that are using mutual value measurement share with each other. They share their own, in our community of practice, they've been sharing their own mutual value measurement frameworks with each other. So it's a way of just making sure that there's both, some privacy of information, but also sharing within the community. So the starting point is just to contact us.
Yeah, that's one of the questions which I had is there a report, the framework report available, which someone can see, okay, this is what it looks like at the end of the day?
Yeah, there is publicly available information on that website. What we are doing to support BCCM and the sector in the ongoing take-up of the framework is a couple of things. So if an organization is interested, frequently Melina, or if they come through Melina, or if they come to us direct, me along with maybe one of my colleagues, there's 4 of us on the research team. We go in and do a 1-hour presentation to the board or to the senior leadership team, very high level, about what is MVM and what are the pros and cons of taking it up. So that's one level of initial support. We run, then there are webinars that we have run, again, an introductory webinar that is available for people to view. Then in a more focused and detailed manner, we have been running what we call master classes. Now, this is a 4-hour master class where once the organization and the leadership team have said, okay, yep, I think this is something that we want to get into and we want to think about it more deeply, they may send a few of their the mid-level people who are going to be working with the framework to attend this masterclass, which again we run, Monash runs. for getting into the detail of the framework and providing guidance on how to run with it. And supporting that is there are some templates and examples and case studies of how you can do it. Now that masterclass, we are now looking at, having run that for the last couple of years, we are now looking to build that into a professional education program that Monash is going to develop, again, along in partnership with BCCM, to make it available to a wider group. These are, of course, fee-based services that we provide. And it may also eventually lead to a form of micro-credentialing or some sort of academic recognition of that module that you have done on MVM, which may then allow you to build that or stack it into with other units into a grad cert or something like that, that now is very common amongst university sort of programs. So there's a number of different things that we are doing, again, always in partnership with BCCM to support any organization that is interested in taking up the frameworks. And these supports are at different levels, as you can see.
So I have a couple of questions which our audience members have asked, which I thought I'll run by you. How does the framework measure development of and growth of cooperatives in line with the government's reporting of the economy? Do you have anything about how it is in line with the government's reporting?
Paul?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
It says, how does the framework measure development and growth of cooperatives in line with the government's reporting of the economy? So looking at saying, okay, how much are we contributing? The government looks at contribution to the economy. So are you all able to use the framework to say this is the kind of contribution, both in a monetary sense or in other aspects?
Yeah, so it's designed to be specific to an individual cooperative or mutual. However, we, the peak body, are using mutual value measurement to measure how we're creating value for our members and the broader economy and society. So we're tracking, we're using it really as a benchmark for ourselves to know, to sense check that we are continuously creating and improving the value that we deliver to our members, but also to reflect the value that cooperatives and mutuals deliver to the broader society. Government, one of the ways that we're working on our advocacy to government is the shaping markets dimension, because governments are really interested in how to make an economy like Australia has a market economy. And so government here is very interested in how to increase competition and consumer choice. So we're taking examples that are generated by mutual value measurement and other case studies to show that cooperatives and mutuals actually make the whole economy more productive, more efficient, but also more equitable and fair for Australians more widely. So it does dovetail in that way.
Okay. Just one more question, which I think was covered, but I'll still see if you have anything more to add. The question is, it says some sectors are developing their own frameworks, for example, community housing, and many organizations are using established frameworks, again, an example of B Corp. How do you see the mutual value measurement framework working with other frameworks?
That is such a great question as well. Right now, we have another industry project, which is ESG and sustainability. A lot of our larger, particularly mutual financial institutions, are getting B Corp certified. what has started to emerge in the conversation around how they can measure, they can do that particular certification framework along with all of the other reporting requirements around E, S, and G, is that mutual value measurement, again, might create a bridging strategy that will enable them to be able to better report into those external frameworks. So with B Corporation, for example, our communities of mutuals and cooperatives has been discussing how much better it would be in terms of preparing the documentation for B Corporation if they were using mutual value measurement, because it's a way of prompting them to think about areas of value that they create that they might not have immediately thought their business was generating. And similarly, we need to influence some of those external frameworks to think about other areas of, value, how we measure it, is almost a contested space. And for a long time, particularly with the era of sort of more neoliberal economics globally, we have been globally promoting some value dimensions over others, namely profit maximization. And you could argue that that led to, a previous financial crisis. So, yeah, I think this is actually an opportunity for us to influence some frameworks as well.
Okay, good.
Is that,
Yes,
I'm sorry. Yeah, just the reality is that you will always have a whole range of different frameworks. And the challenge, I think, is not to sort of, stress out about the fact that there are multiple frameworks, but to position the mutual value framework as the product for the market and niche that we are interested in, which is the co-op and mutual sector. And once that becomes clear to our co-ops and mutuals, I think the take-up will happen, and they will look at how the mutual value measurement framework is actually much better for them compared to some of these other frameworks which have not been custom built for the co-op and mutual sector. These have been custom built elsewhere, essentially for listed organizations, and now organizations in this sector are taking it and force fitting it to fit their business model. It may work, it may not, but I don't think we want to worry too much about that. We want to make sure that the co-ops and mutuals understand that there is a better alternative. But that's a journey.
So again, thank you very much, Melina. Thank you very much, Dr. Thamba. This has been a very interesting, productive conversation. I think the motivation for starting is that we need to communicate our value, but communicate value in the framework of the mutuals, what we value, keeping that at the center and building around it. So I think you all have come up with a great framework, which I'm sure those on the call today would be interested to know more. We'll also have this video out so that the larger audience can also know about this. And we'll try and see how we can maybe get a few members from across the region to take it up as a pilot and see what does it involve, how they can put it in place. And what you said also is that we need to create a community of practice. It's not just doing in isolation, but then coming together as a community, practice it and seeing how it's being put in place and what the results are. And that's how I think the network also will grow. So I'm hoping that this will be the start. And we are looking forward to seeing how it evolves, not only in Australia, but also how it's taken up by some of our members in other countries. So thank you very much for all the groundwork. You all have done all the work, 2 years of work, money, resources, time, and we have a framework. So we don't have to do something new. We can use it and see how it can be customized and then take it forward. So thank you so much for taking the time. And we look forward to being in touch with you. Shivali,
Thank you.
over to you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I've got to go, so I'll drop out.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Yeah,
very
so
much.
thank you. Thank you everyone for your time today. And we are still accepting the articles for COOP Dialogue Issue 2. My colleague Simran has posted the link to call for articles and the email ID where you can share your articles if you would like to submit any articles for that. And we would also be publishing this interview on our YouTube channel, and it will be released with the publication in May 2022. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again. Bye-bye.